We're going to start here by looking at what happens to a request when it comes into IIS and how is that ultimately dispatched onto ASP.NET. And then we'll begin diving into the pipeline itself. Now, the way this works is going to differ slightly between versions of IIS, so I want to make that clear. And in fact, before I even go into these bullet points here, what I'd like to do is go out to a sample page, ASP.NET page hosted in IIS, and just sort of go through the motions of accessing it so we have a framework of what's going to be happening in our mind. So what I've done here is I've taken a sample from a preceding module, the control-based programming discussion, and this is just a page that's got a bunch of stuff in it. So it's a ASP.NET page with bulleted list, and it's got a run at server H3 element, and it's got a label and a calendar and some other stuff. So it's typical ASP.NET page with a bunch of stuff in it. And what I'm going to do is just access this page via the browser and host it in IIS. And to do that, I've simply placed it in the inetpub www root directory, which is the default directory for the default website directory for your machine. And then I just want you to sort of think about what happens when I make that request. Okay, so initially we're not going to have the web server running at all, the process running. In fact, let's go kill this guy, which is the worker process that IIS is hosted in. Okay, so there's nothing running right now. So what we're going to have to do when we access the site is IIS is going to have to kick off the process, and then it's going to have to go locate the file. This is the endpoint right here, and somehow it's going to have to take these two files and turn them into a couple of class definitions inside of the worker process, and then invoke a method on a resulting instance of the class. So let's go ahead and try this. That was hello CB, so I'm just going to go to http localhost hello cb.aspx. Okay, and that's going to bring up the process. Notice W3WP is now running here. I'm running an IS7, so that's the worker process that's going to be hosting all of this. And the ASP.NET page was instantiated, and when we looked at this previously, the assembly that contains the class definition was dropped onto the disk at this location. So all of that took place in the context of this request being made. And that's really what I want to focus on, is how does that whole process happen? What are the various pieces involved? Who's talking to whom? And how could we potentially influence that process along the way? So let's start by talking about IS 5 and 6 first, because those are slightly different. Well, they're all a little bit different, but IS 7 is notably different. So in IS 5 or 6, IIS is going to receive the initial request for the page. That's the guy that's listening on port 80 and 443, etc. And in IS 5 and 6, the way the request is identified as an ASP.NET request and dispatched onto ASP.NET is the ASP.NET ISAPI DLL. This is an unmanaged DLL. Is registered for ASP.NET extensions. So ASPX, HX, AXD, ASMX, etc. So all of the ASP.NET extensions are associated with that ISAPI DLL. And then in IS5, what's going to happen is the ISAPI extension is going to pass the request on to the worker process, which in that case is ASP.NET WP. Or in IS6, you're already going to be inside of the worker process, because IIS is going to be running in the context of the worker process as well, not in a separate one. And it will dispatch the request directly to ASP.NET. But again, it will have had this ISAPI DLL registered for ASP.NET extensions. And then ASP.NET is going to take over. And that's when the whole class is going to be parsed and turned into the file is going to be parsed and turned into a class definition and invoked to process the request. And then when it's done, it's going to send the request back to IIS and ultimately return to the client. So in ASP.NET, in IS7, things get a little bit different, because there's no longer any need to have this ISAPI extension registered, because ASP.NET is a first-class entity in IIS. That is, its handlers and modules are recognized as valid objects that can be dispatched to directly by IIS. So you don't have to go through that unmanaged ISAPI interface that we've had to go through prior to IS7. So it actually things actually get a bit simpler, because IIS simply receives a request. It has an association for ASPX with a specific managed class, which in this case is going to be the page handler factory, and it will go ahead and take care of finding or creating the class needed and dispatching the request. So next we'll take a look in more detail at each of these and how the request goes through, and more specifically how ASP.NET actually compiles and generates the code for these endpoints.